Susan Roberts. She is a professor of nutrition and psychiatry at Tufts University and an international expert on diet and weight regulation. She was a chef before becoming a nutrition scientist, so she speaks from both sides of the food discussion. She has published nearly 200 scientific papers relating to food and weight loss. She's also a recipient of the prestigious E.B. McCollum Award that the American Society for Nutrition has presented her for being a creative force in research. She would describe her research as improving techniques for weight control as instructive failures because although volunteers did lose weight, they were hungry and gained weight rapidly at the end of dieting. With improvements based on incorporating scientific advances over time, volunteers in our program today typically maintain weight loss with a duration of follow-up and composition of lost weight is close to 100% fat. So that's encouraging news. I'm looking forward to hearing that. So without further ado, let's join me in welcoming Susan Roberts. Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming. You know, I've actually never been in this building, and I walked down the hall and I thought, there's so many good things going on here. I'm going to talk to an empty room. So thank you for coming. Weight loss without gimmicks. You know, I actually had to look up what a gimmick was to be sure that I really knew what it meant to start this talk. It's a device employed illegally to cheat, deceive, or trick, an undesirable feature played down, a trivial or unnecessary innovation to enhance appeal. And I thought about this and I thought, I don't really care about that. What I really care about is whether weight loss works. You know, if you have to do that with gimmicks, that's fine. So with your permission, I changed my talk to weight loss that works. And, you know, gimmicks certainly come into that. Why do we care? We care because it's a problem that's completely out of control. I know I sound like a Brit, but I'm an adopted American. I've lived here 22 years, so this is my country too. And, two-thirds of us are overweight. The rate of adult obesity appears to have plateaued, but it's certainly not coming down. And the rate of childhood obesity continues to rise at horrible proportions. In any 1 year, 51% of adults attempt to lose weight. Americans are very, very unhappy with weight. If you ask an extremely obese person whether they would rather be obese or blind or deaf or have diabetes, reproducibly, they would have anything rather than be obese. They would rather be deaf. They would rather be blind. They would rather have type 2 diabetes. This is an enormous problem for people who are suffering from this, and it's a very expensive problem. Medicare, Medicaid, and estimated lost productivity comes in at about $90 billion or so a year. Those are the figures from actually a few years ago. Consumers spend an additional $35 billion. If we were to solve the obesity problem, you could bail out GM, Chrysler, and solve half the housing foreclosures in one go. So this is big money that we're talking about. What happened? We're going to talk about how to deal with it, but let's just start off with food. The USDA has per capita food consumption corrected for waste. Back in the 1975, our food supply was 2,200. And then that's what happened over time. Today, our estimated food supply is 564 calories, more than it was back in 1975. That's a huge amount. That's a whole meal. That's about the size of those bags sitting in the back. And you don't have to go much further than that to say, why are we fat? We're fat because we are eating more. And I'll go into, you know, the underlying reasons for that. But food is the major problem. What have we eaten? That's kind of an instructive thing too, which also comes from the USDA. Two foods account for most of this increase: high fructose corn syrup and oil. Four more contribute a bit: flour, cheese, shortening, and edible beef tallow. What didn't increase was all the good stuff. Beef, seafood, candy, chocolate, chips, and cream have all been flat. Ice cream and frozen desserts consumption actually decreased 13%. This isn't high living that's made us fat, okay? This is high fructose corn syrup and oil. We haven't been going out eating indulgent, wonderful food to do this. Okay, I'm going to talk about the theory of weight control and then talk about where we need to go from now. If we expend, on average, 2,300 calories, men, women, children, young, old, and all that, as long as what we eat equals what we expend, we maintain weight and everything's good. If we want to lose weight, there's a few ways we can theoretically consider it. Okay, we can increase our energy expenditure. There's been a lot of government advice on increasing energy expenditure, or we can reduce energy intake. So energy expenditure, the trouble with increasing energy expenditure is it doesn't work. There's been about 50 studies now, exercise intervention studies, that have looked at how much body fat changes when you introduce exercise for the long term. And this line here is the slope of the relationship between extra exercise and body fat. Same slope for women and men. 1 hour a day of exercise, that's about here, is the absolute most you can get anybody to do in an exercise intervention study. And that's a huge thing. It's very hard to get anybody to add an extra hour a day. Most of these studies, I'm having problems with my pointer. Most of these studies only manage to get people to add about half an hour. If the whole population added 1 hour a day of jogging, vigorous exercise, 1 hour a day of jogging, that would result on average in about a 6-pound decrease in weight, not very much. And speaking on a population level, that's completely unfeasible. We can't get the whole population to add a whole hour. That would be a major change in lifestyle, work, productivity, and every other thing. So when we need to think about changing obesity in the country, we have to focus more on food. It's quite instructive to think about what starvation would do. We would never recommend starvation. Starvation is very harmful. Starvation kills people. But if you starved somebody, the most fat they would lose would be about 4 pounds a week, because energy expenditure drops, and fat loss is, this difference between intake and expenditure multiplied by the energy cost of fat over the weeks. It calculates down to only 4 pounds a week. If you cut calories in half, that's also a pretty serious thing to do. Energy expenditure doesn't drop so much. The difference here between consumed and expended adds up to about a 2-pound loss of fat per week, perhaps a bit more, but only about 2 pounds. And again, this is serious stuff, asking people to cut their calorie intake in half. The Minnesota starvation studies from World War II cut calories in half, and they got a whole buffet of symptoms: raging hunger, lethargy, cravings, loss of sexual function, compulsive behaviors. So where does this lead us? 2 pounds of adipose tissue is about the maximum sustainable we can get out of people. We can do better now than back in World War II in terms of how to get people to cut calories and feel okay about that. But 2 pounds is about the limit. Diets promising more are making false claims. It's as simple as that. If you look on Google, and I'll show you that, there's many false claims. Even 2 pounds a week is a serious diet. You can't just do that by cutting calories, because if you cut calories, you're back. And the Minnesota starvation experiment, people get starving, they have symptoms, they can't keep it up. And the implication of this is that losing significant amounts of fat is a long-term project. That may not be enormous news to anybody in this building, because my guess is you're more clued in than the average American. But still today out there, one of the biggest, a false claim isn't a gimmick. Technically speaking, they're different. But oftentimes what people are doing is linking together a false claim and a gimmick. So they say, this is a special composition, all you have to do is eat avocados, and you will lose 30 pounds a month. So, gimmicks and false claims really are first cousins. After somebody's lost weight, they have to keep it off. And people also get stuck there. So this is where we were before we're fat, when we're fat, before we've lost weight. In order to gain weight, people are consuming more than they're expending. Once they've gained weight, they continue to eat more to maintain that weight, because just walking around a heavier body takes more calories. So you eat more, you gain weight, and then you need that amount of calories to keep your weight. We get somebody to lose weight, and then after weight loss, Energy expenditure is reduced because you have a smaller body. It costs less calories to walk a smaller body around. And the implication of that is you need to permanently eat less. Exercise does help a bit. You can keep energy expenditure up by exercising, but exercise isn't enough. If for people to lose weight and keep it off requires a permanent change in calorie intake. In the lab, we've made enormous strides in improving how we help people with weight. This is just one example from the Roberts lab. Back in 1994, we did a weight loss study. We successfully introduced a very small amount of weight loss. This was a calorie-cutting World War II kind of experiment. Subsequently, our volunteers gained back all the weight they'd lost and then some. They were ravenously hungry with just by cutting calories. When we let them off the protocol, that hunger was just enormous, and they would eat 5,000 calories a day and still feel empty. And they ended up significantly fatter than we ever had them in the first place. Today, we can get people to lose far more weight using different kinds of diets, and they will keep most of that weight off for the duration of the follow-up. So in the lab, there's been enormous advances in how to help people control weight. Out in the community, it's still the Wild West. The Federal Trade Commission is fighting an ongoing battle against false claims. These are the media recommendations from 2003, and I actually couldn't find anything more recent than that, but they are arguing that none of the following should be out there. Weight loss more than 2 pounds a week for a month or more without diet or exercise, causes substantial weight loss no matter how much the consumer eats, causes permanent weight loss even when the consumer stops consuming the product, blocks fat absorption, safely allows you to lose more than 3 pounds a week for 4 weeks, causes substantial weight loss for all users, causes substantial weight loss by wearing it on the body or rubbing it in the skin. I did a Google search last week when I was putting this talk together. I just typed in how to lose weight, okay, and I came up with this. Almost every one of these things that come up on the front of Google is a false claim according to the definitions of the Federal Trade Commission right now. It's foolproof. Safely lose 20 to 30 pounds per month. You can lose 30 pounds in 30 days. How to lose 20 pounds of fat in 30 days. I lost 5 pounds per week by obeying this one rule. The Federal Trade Commission war against false claims is not working. I will put that out there. I've got no idea how to fix that, but it's not working, and it's extremely harmful because it gives the impression that weight loss can be easy and quick. And then when people find it's not easy and quick, they're more likely to give up. So what should we be doing? Okay, just cutting calories doesn't work. People are desperate to lose weight, and that desperation is allowing advertisements out there to exist because people would like that to be true. They have an enormous weight problem and they would like to deal with it. So I want to spend a couple of minutes talking about why we eat the way we do, as a means for what we can do going forward. There's a few things that all research studies agree on. Nutrition is a very controversial subject. You can easily find one study that says A and the other one that says Z about all kinds of topics. But in the obesity field, there's 4 topics on which approximately 100% of studies all say the same thing. One is that we need to satisfy hunger. People who are hungry eat. And there appears to be at least 4 dietary factors which are specific for hunger. That's to say, if you feed people these foods, they are relatively more satiating than, let's say, soda and Hostess Twinkies. High-fiber foods work very well for satiety and hunger control. Low glycemic index carbohydrates work very well too, particularly for people with high insulin secretion. High-protein foods are also very satiating, and high-volume foods are also very satiating. Your thing has changed my slides a bit. Fiber may be particularly important. The average American today consumes about 15 grams of fiber a day. national recommendations from the Institute of Medicine for fiber intake are 25 grams a day in women and 35 grams a day in men. This average of 15 is the biggest deficiency, if you like, compared to recommendations of any nutrient on the spectrum. The American diet is astonishingly lacking in fiber by comparison with our recommendations. And when you compare it to the Paleolithic estimated intake of 100 plus grams per day, we are consuming only 1/7 of the intake that our Paleolithic genes evolved to take. Fiber's at the top of the list here because it's probably the thing that will have the most effect in terms of making hunger control easier in the population. I think there's a special place in hell reserved for people who sell soda. Liquid calories have the opposite effect of fiber. They have literally no satiety despite high calories. There's been a whole bunch of studies from different labs, not mine, showing that if you give somebody a soda in the mid-morning, for example, they eat just as much lunch as if they had water. Our bodies don't seem to register the calories in soda and in other carbonated beverages, and so you drink those calories on top of all the other food that you eat. Remember back as well that one of the two major changes in the American diet has been a huge increase in high fructose corn syrup. The second thing that everybody else agrees on is that we eat just because it's there. This is just one study to give an example of this, bad popcorn in big buckets. Moviegoers were given free popcorns, fresh or stale, medium or large. The stale had actually been aged for 2 weeks. He'd made it and then left it sitting there for 2 weeks, so that it was really stale. So if you have a large portion of fresh popcorn, you eat more. If you have a large portion of stale popcorn, you also eat more. Just the fact that things come in large portions and it's more physically available means that we eat more. I'll go into the mechanisms underlying this in a minute. We also like calories. 75% of the foods that people say they like extremely or crave are the highest calorie things out there: chocolate, salty snacks, ice cream, brownies, cookies, cakes, muffins. That's in America. If you go to somewhere like China, which we've also done, you find that things like fried pork belly are at the top of their list, and they're also the highest calorie things out there. The energy density of foods is a strong. It's not the taste of the foods, it's how many calories they have. We learn to like the taste of things if they have high calories, which is why things like mashed potato tastes good. Mashed potato tastes of very little, but it's packed with butter and cream, and so we post-condition on the taste because our brain is smart enough to know that we get a rush of calories after it. We also eat variety. Variety is an enormous and neglected factor in food regulation. Every single study that has ever been done shows that more variety leads to more consumption. That's not just true in humans, it's true in, rabbits, cats, trout, fruit flies, every kind of species that's been studied, and there's been something like 10 or 15 species. If you put more variety in front of a person or an animal, they consume more. We're so sensitive to variety that even if I do something like put 3 shapes of pasta on your plate rather than 1 shape, you increase pasta consumption by 14%. That's important because there's been an explosion in variety in the American food supply. Starting in about 1980, this is how the variety of candy and gum went up, bakery foods and entrees. Fruits and vegetables hasn't enormously increased in variety because, we're limited by what fruits and vegetables grow. And it's worth noting that there was a break point in obesity. Sometime around 1980 was where we actually lost control. And that break point also coincides with the break point in variety. So there's 4 things that humans seem to be hardwired to eat for. We eat for hunger, we eat because food's there, we eat high-calorie foods more, and we eat variety more. So what's going on? In the brain, We know that eating is controlled by 3 distinct neurological systems. We have a hunger satiety center down there. We have a pleasure center in the front of the cortex. We have a reward center in the midbrain. This section here is our unconscious brain. Hunger operates out of our unconscious brain. Reward operates out of our unconscious brain. The only thing that we're actually conscious of is the pleasure, but the need, the addiction chemicals like dopamine that we get from eating happens down here in our unconscious brain, and so does hunger. And I'll explain why that's important in a minute. So our unconscious brain receives a bunch of signals that tell us, that keep it happy or tell us we need to eat. We have afferent signals coming up from our body. What we eat determines vagal nerve signals from the stomach, gut hormones, circulating nutrients, and fat cells. All of these tell our hypothalamus, they tell our midbrain the state of food in the body. Have we got enough food? Do we need to eat more? That's our internal control. We also have a whole extra external control. Our senses, sight, smell, and taste, report what's out there to our hunger, satiety, and reward and pleasure centers. And they do that through what's called the cephalic phase of digestion. When we have a large pizza in front of us, for example, the sight, the smell, and if we're silly enough to have the first bite, the taste of that pizza activates a whole chain of metabolic events. It increases real metabolic hunger by decreasing blood glucose. Blood glucose changes are one of our signals for hunger. A bunch of studies have shown that. So you see pizza, you have a surge of insulin, it drops blood glucose, and you're actually hungry. You need to eat because even if you have enough nutrients in your body, you're getting the signals that you're actually hungry and in need of food. That same sight of the pizza also expands stomach volume. And that means that you have a bigger stomach, which needs more filling to feel equally full. That's a very important concept. You look at the pizza looks nice, your stomach muscles relax, and you need to put more in your stomach before you get signals saying, I've eaten enough. It also accelerates digestion. Gastric motility is increased so that you put that pizza away more quickly and you're ready for the next meal again. There's something called a second meal effect. When you have something good, you actually digest food faster and you're ready for another go. What this all means, this is my most important slide. If you've been asleep, okay, please wake up until now. Okay. In effect, our environment controls our metabolism. We are hardwired to have our food intake controlled by what's in front of us. It controls our hunger. It controls our synthesis of addiction chemicals that keep us eating. And when there is more food in front of us, we need to eat more to feel equally satisfied. That's a huge, important thing. And what this does is explains why an increasingly toxic food environment made us eat 100, 300, 556 calories more of something which none of us would consider delicious, high fructose corn syrup and oil, simply because it was in front of us, it was available, some of it was liquid calories which our body doesn't even see. We ate those things to feel equally full. Nobody was being indulgent here. Everybody feels guilty today, but in fact nobody was being indulgent. People feel guilty, but we overate to feel normal because of this environmental control over hunger and metabolism, which happens unconsciously. Okay. The big picture is that bad food environments make weight control literally impossible, even for people with good intentions. Yeah. Okay. That's something which needs to be on the table more than it is. Okay, so to come back to the purpose of my talk, avoiding gimmicks is important. I don't want anybody in America to believe that you can lose 20 pounds of fat in 30 days, because you really can't. But avoiding gimmicks is not enough. To lose weight and keep it off, individuals need to do things. They do need to have realistic expectations about how much weight they can lose. There's no magic belly for body fat, and that they need to reduce energy intake for a long time in order to become non-obese. They need to eat foods that satisfy our basic hardwired biology, those afferent signals coming up from our vagus nerve from circulating nutrients. In practice, that means high fiber foods, high protein foods, high volume foods, and low GI carbs. They need to satisfy variety instincts with more high satiety variety, not the brownies, chips, cookies, which is very easy to get because there's such an abundance of them in the supermarket. And they need to satisfy their caloric density intake with a more regular meal structure and various other things that will help that. And they need to reduce metabolic stimulation from excess food in their own environment. They need to get rid of the sight, the smell, the general availability of food. That's a hard thing to do in our country. Society needs to help, I think, and it's something that's not happening. Consumers can do more to help themselves. They can take charge, make their work environment better as parents get involved in school food. The media can do a great deal more. They can refuse advertising for untested gimmicks and diets that promise too much. Some outlets do that already, but others don't. There's a large number of magazines, for example, and ways to get around the Federal Trade Commission guidelines that even the major TV channels do today, just because people are so obsessed with weight loss, they're so unhappy about it, and people want to do that. Scientists, I don't think progress is over yet. We're doing a lot better, but there's more progress we can make on how to make things easier. And to be responsible when talking to the media, the media comes along and say, "Oh, wow, what a fantastic study, Dr. Roberts." It's easy to say, "Oh, thank you," when in fact what you should say, "Look, this is a different result from somebody last year, and we need to weigh up the whole lot." I've reserved the biggest number of bullets for government because I think that's where the most work needs to be done right now. I think it would be really helpful if you guys accepted and went and spread the word a bit more that the obesity crisis simply will not be solved without a great deal more federal government involvement. We need to get economists and nutrition scientists to work out how to change the food environment. And the key thing here is that introducing healthy choices will not be enough, because unhealthy food speaks to our unconscious brain. Unhealthy food has to be disappeared in some way in order for the obesity crisis to really be solved. And what's wrong with thinking big? We're not just talking about regulating school food here, because that won't be enough. Restaurants are a big problem. Restaurants typically provide portions which are 2 to 3 sizes what somebody actually needs, and then you've got that food in front of you getting in through your eyes and your nose, sending signals to your unconscious brain. I would love a federal junk food tax. I mean, if there's any single thing that would help, that would be a great place to start, along with making restaurants responsible for providing reasonable sized portions, subsidized weight loss programs. And I think it's important to continue ongoing efforts to eliminate false claims and hoaxes that don't work, because if you take the pressure off that, it'll be even worse. But this is where the action is really needed. I think there's a great resistance to taking the responsibility away from the consumer. Consumers feel guilty. They feel it's their problem. The government tells them to, count calories and exercise more and things like that. But consumers can't do this because they are just eating to feel normal. In this environment, they're just eating to feel normal, and the environment needs to change for the relationship between what's normal and calorie intake to rebalance out. There's a lot of money to be saved here. And it would be very fixable if the government is willing to get involved. So, I think that the more you guys are willing to put this on the table as an important issue, the better everybody would be. I'm a weight loss scientist. I have a new diet book out there trying to help individuals. But it's an uphill struggle for everybody to lose weight in this environment. And it would be much better if we accepted that this is not just the consumer's responsibility to deal with and to help them starting in this building, actually. So thank you very much.
I wouldn't mind starting off with a couple questions just One is more of a statement than a question. When I visiting New York City, where they have the calories on the restaurant menus, I thought was a great thing because it really did stop me from ordering the cheese fries and ordering the shrimp instead for an appetizer. So I don't know if that was one of your thoughts in terms of making it a recommendation that. In New York City, they require the restaurants to put the calories and the nutritional information on the menu.
The labeling? You know, I think to have calorie labeling would be very useful. It's not going to be a magic bullet.
It's not, but it does make you think twice about ordering certain things.
Yeah, I mean, we actually just have a paper working its way through the review process on the accuracy of reported calorie intakes by restaurants and things like that. The average restaurant underreports calories by 15% currently. If you just take samples, and fast food restaurants are actually rather better than independent chains because I guess they have better quality control and things like that. But the average is 15%, which isn't a lot. But some individual meals contain twice as many calories as stated on their website. So I think labeling and stuff is very good, but it would only be truly useful if it was accompanied by some monitoring of whether. You know, I'm convinced that there's a lot of lies out there about labeling. I mean, on foods. I mean, you know, I'm a nutrition scientist, so I understand what the relationship is between ingredients and foods. And, you know, places like Whole Foods, they have their own brands. And I look at this can of minestrone soup, and it says it has 5 grams of fiber per portion. And then I look at the ingredients, and I say, you can't get 5 grams of fiber out of 3 kidney beans. You know, you can't do that. So, you know, whether they're actually making up these numbers, or you know how the numbers come to be, I have no idea. But you know, I think there's a great number of errors that just forcing people to give you more numbers without any oversight may not be desperately useful.
And then the second question is, how do you break sort of that how do you make that mental break from craving the sugars and the junk food?
That's my favorite issue. We've done some research on craving. People blame cravings on themselves. You know, they talk about triggers, emotional eating, and things like that. But you know, as a diet doctor as well as a diet scientist, you know, what we see is that if you get rid of the hunger, most of the cravings typically disappear. Cravings are formed by hooking together, different things in the brain. So, what happens is you're stressed out and you eat a brownie. And so the next time you're stressed, you think about eating a brownie, and you get a reward of dopamine, and so it becomes a reward issue. But if you take the hunger out, most people walk around somewhat hungry because they eat the wrong foods, which are very low in fiber. And so they're always walking around feeling like they can eat more. If you take away the hunger by getting people to eat more fiber, less high glycemic index carbohydrates, for example, you give them a kind of a bedrock level of satisfaction. That means that when they're stressed, the first thing they don't think about is brownies because they don't have any internal need state. So that's one way to deal with cravings is to just deal with hunger and let a lot of them take their course. The other thing that happens is that cravings happen because you think you can eat something. There's food in front of you, and you think about it, and it sets up a need for brownie that the next time, even when the food's not there, you think about the brownie. And so the other thing that we do to cure cravings is we get people to eat very regular meals and snacks. You can't eat anything outside a regular planned meal and snack. If you want your craved food, you can have it, but only in the middle of a meal. So we take away the post-ingestive conditioned reward because those cravings are maintained by the fact that you actually eat the brownie. The brownie gets absorbed very quickly and tells you, yes, that taste was good because it came with a rush of calories. So you're always maintaining the craving. When you move the brownie into the middle of a meal, you're taking away the reward of the taste because you've slowed down the digestion of the brownie by putting a soup and a salad in front of it, for example. And so you can actually completely eliminate cravings like that. It's very exciting when people decide to lose weight, and we put them on one of these programs. Probably about half of them, especially the women, because women suffer from cravings more than men, they often say that that's the best thing. They've lost weight and they're thrilled about that. But what they really are thrilled about is the fact that suddenly they're not getting, uncontrollable urges to eat all the time. Just simple things like adding a great deal more fiber and having regular meal structure gets rid of a lot of that. There's a small number of cases, 5-10%, who really are, kind of emotional eaters, but I think it's a minority, and they need a psychologist on top of that to separate, food from stress and things like that. But for most people, quite simple things do a lot.
What if you take your lunch meal, say, which is going to be a certain amount of calories if you eat it all, and kind of dribble it out throughout the afternoon and on the evening? You're going to get the same number of calories overall, and you can keep on putting something in your mouth.
Can you do that?
If you're at work with your bag lunch and that's all you have, you're not going to add other stuff.
I think that actually is quite helpful because it slows down the reward. But the trouble is, because it slows down the reward, you get less reward, and so people tend to drift back to meal feeding. I mean, as humans, we're designed with a big stomach because we're supposed to eat at intervals and then digest over the next few hours. When you diet, spreading out meals like that becomes essential. Just changing the kinds of foods that you eat, adding high fiber cereals, eating more vegetables, cutting down how much butter you put on toast and then making the toast a slowly digested bread. That helps, but you also have to eat more frequently. I mean, people who are really going after losing weight usually have to eat 3 meals and 2 snacks a day. So, there's partly that, but if you don't change the foods as well, it would have a pretty small effect. You don't
But the amount of calories is the amount of calories that you take in a day is.
Yeah, I mean, I think spreading out the food, if you can do it, will have some effect because it lowers the intensity of the metabolic effects of the food. But because it's still a brownie, if you cut a brownie into quarters and you say, I'm going to have a quarter now, and I'm going to have a quarter after lunch, and I'm going to have a quarter this evening, and I'm going to leave a quarter for tomorrow, how many people can do that? I think if you can do it, it's good. But if you say, okay, I really want chocolate, but I'm going to melt some chocolate on top of high fiber cereal and have that instead of a brownie, then you've got fiber as well, and so you've got a greater level of fullness, and so the brownie when you have it is less compelling because you have a lower state of hunger and a higher state of satiety on top of that. I think, weight control all starts with better hunger control. That's not to say that other things go away automatically, but, if you substantially change the kinds of foods people eat and they feel fuller, then they can go out to eat and not eat 3,000 calories. They can reduce triggers and emotional eating and things like that. But the first place you need to start is what they eat to lose weight. Gaining weight and losing weight are not the same things. I mean, we gained weight because we didn't see the liquid calories in soda, and because the potatoes could come fried rather than baked, because it was there. But losing weight requires additional steps because what you're having to do is get under the radar of your hunger instinct. So I think, it's easy to think that small steps will help you prevent weight gain. But when it comes to losing weight, you have to go at it more vigorously, I think.
When you were talking about exercise at the beginning of the talk, you pointed out that most of us don't have an extra hour a day to spend on great help.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I've been on Weight Watchers for about a year. It's been very successful, but I can tell you that we spend about an extra hour a day, all told, shopping and cooking and, planning menus, going through cookbooks to find fiber values. I mean, it physically takes time because, ironically, McDonald's is the only place you can trust the calorie counts to eat out at. You can look at that label, find out how many calories are in the Big Mac, and eat a smaller breakfast to get around that. But otherwise, we just have to cook because that's the only way we can do it.
Cooking,
How is that something that's feasible for the long term? We're young professionals, we don't have kids, but.
Well, I think the feasibility is a big issue. There's a whole generation of people, such as yourself, who are younger than me, who are growing up without cooking skills. And, that's a major issue because it throws you onto two things. One of them is eating out, which, is really hard to weight control when you eat out, a great big deal. Or going into supermarkets and buying ready-prepared foods and simple foods and doing that. That's probably the better option, I think, than eating out because they lie and because the portions are huge. I mean, when I have people who are actively losing weight in my lab, people who eat out a lot, there's a whole spectrum of things that they do, and they make it work, but it's not small steps, okay? The most determined in them, they will go out with colleagues for work lunches and things like that, but they never eat out. They will eat their own food first, and they will go and sit at the table and have a glass of mineral water. And they completely keep their weight loss program that way. For the ones who are too embarrassed to do that, they order something sensible, They order a piece of chicken and a salad with dressing on the side so they can control the dressing. So they've got the right foods in front of them, and then all they have to do is deal with their availability instinct. The chicken's twice as much chicken as they need. And so, we have a whole range of things that we tell them to do. You can eat half your chicken, the right amount. Weight Watchers will tell you how to work out how much chicken you need. You've got the other half of the chicken sitting on your plate, and the sight and the smell of the chicken is getting into your brain. It's giving you hunger signals. It's keeping your stomach relaxed. So you have to get rid of the sight. So you can put your napkin over the chicken. Stuff like that is actually very effective because it works with the biology of what the problem is. Some people will pour water over the chicken. It stops it being food because it's now uninteresting. Other people would prefer to be economical, and they ask the restaurant up front to halve the chicken and box up the half before they ever get anything on their plate. I mean, I'm not pretending all these things are easy, but I'm saying those are the kinds of things that people who are successfully controlling their weight in this difficult environment are having to resort to in order to make it work.
Do you think the government could also take a better lead at educating the public instead of just doing things like taxing? Doing things like explaining better meal plans, eating smaller meals, trying to figure out things to help good foods be provided to people easier, like apples. You buy an apple at a grocery store, it might cost $1 by weight, but you can buy a Big Mac and a super menu thing for $3. So people are going to get a full meal versus an apple.
I would love to see pricing structure on foods. I mean, in research studies, it makes a huge difference. If you put apples and cookies in a vending machine, and the price structure has a huge effect on whether people pull out the apple or the cookie, and it does it because of the perceptual availability. If something costs 3 times as much, it feels less available to you. So, things like taxes and pricing structure, I think, you could solve our obesity problem without anybody doing any more work if that kind of stuff was on the table. Without the government being really active about this, we won't solve the problem. And we're only at the tip of the iceberg. The obesity problem is a relatively recent phenomenon. So people are fat, but they don't yet have all of the health problems that they will certainly get that are coming down the pike. type 2 diabetes, heart disease, many kinds of cancers, including breast cancer. All of those things are going to explode. So however much healthcare is costing now, it's going to cost a great deal more by the time the epidemic's finished with us.
Just to come back to menu labels just for a moment, there's been a lot of activity on menu labeling in the states.
Yeah.
Federal level hasn't really taken off yet, but what I wanted to know is, have you done any research or are you aware of any research that actually correlates behavioral changes as a result of just menu labeling? For example, putting on the menu board in a fast food restaurant, high caloric intake.
That's not really my thing, and I've heard that there's some things coming along that have made a difference, but I actually haven't seen anything on that. How much difference it will make, I don't know.
Aside from anecdotal,
Yeah.
evidence that would make you think logically that it would change behavior,
Yeah.
sometimes that doesn't always add up.
If you guys have to spread your effort out, there's so much effort and time and money that you can put into something. My personal feeling is that that's a less useful place to fish than junk food taxes and pricing structures, which, would certainly be enormously effective. Labeling may or may not be effective.
Might be a little more politically palatable, though.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.